Hello everyone, welcome back for another AI news show. Today, myself and my co-host Kevin Kieller will be talking to co-founder and principal solutions architect Adam Ball from Cloud Revolution about Ambient AI, a really hot topic that's getting a lot of interest lately, so stand by for a great show. Kevin, how's things? Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you, Rob. And I'm super excited to talk about Ambient AI. It's interesting because, for a while, it's sometimes called Ambient AI, ambient intelligence. I think, it's been around for a long time. Mark Weiser, who was a computer scientist and the CTO at Xerox PARC, came up with the term ubiquitous computing. And he really said the most profound technologies are those that disappear. They weave themselves into the fabric of everyday life until they're indistinguishable from it. And ambient intelligence is really that idea. It's all these sensors, and it used to be abbreviated AI, but now AI has become artificial intelligence. And so most people now ambient intelligence, it's like capital A, small m, capital I. And the idea is that artificial intelligence can really make all these, you might have heard of IoT, all of these sensors can make sense out of the reams of data flowing into them. And it's exciting what can be done when you apply artificial intelligence to this ambient intelligence. And it's also, as I think we're going to talk about, there are some scary things about it as well. So super excited to have Adam here and to talk about this sort of adjacent to artificial intelligence topic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting topic. I love the whole kind of ambient computing kind of, ambient AI kind of conversation. Really, really interesting, especially with our XR publication. I think it's just great. So, first of all, let's talk about a few bits and pieces that we pulled out that we thought might be interesting to the audience before we meet Adam. But first of all, there is an elephant in the room here, and that's privacy and ethical considerations. So if I'm walking down the street with a pair of these on, which are Meta Ray-Bans, then apparently the new version is going to be or the new update to the software is going to be able to identify strangers. And that's raising some serious eyebrows. What do you think to that, Kevin?
Yeah, I think, there was an article that, basically someone took that and applied some, artificial intelligence and facial, recognition, and then trolled the internet to find people's home addresses. And obviously that brings up all kinds of stalking concerns and these kinds of things. From my perspective, I guess, privacy's dead. I think that that's a little bit of, the case. If you've got personal data up on the internet, that's probably a bad thing. I think it's a lot like artificial intelligence in a corporate setting where they always say you should audit permissions on your documents because it's not that AI has more permissions. It's just really good at uncovering access to that. And I think, with things like, visual facial recognition, and then being able to match it to personal data. We all should get, audit what personal data is on the internet. And, because there are definitely privacy concerns. I think the genie's out of the bottle. So yes, we can have legislation. I know those Ray-Bans have a light that comes on when it's recording and they try to make it tamper proof. Even if you try to cover it up, it's allegedly somehow detects it. But the truth of the matter is, I think, we can use artificial intelligence to scour the internet for personal data we don't want out there. And maybe with agentic AI, it can even clean it up. So, maybe AI is both the problem and potentially the solution. That's where my thoughts go.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it, that also Apple are rumored to be exploring the smart glasses market. And I think it was Mac 9 to 5, the publication, they were talking about an internal study that Apple are doing with their employees to see whether, to kind of figure out whether, there's legs in kind of getting into the smart glasses market. Did you pick up on that? And what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think the idea of, moving away from a phone and just having, cool looking sunglasses like the ones we're wearing. And I always think of that scene in the Terminator where he walks into the bar and it identifies the target. But, the truth of the matter is, when you're working remotely in a meeting, you are able to Google things and make yourself seem smarter. And I think, we've all been used to that when you work remotely. And I think, if you're in the boardroom, wouldn't it be nice to be sitting there and be reminded of things, that you should be saying or, making note of through, some glasses. So, or eventually contact lenses. I think we're definitely going to get there because this whole augmented intelligence, we're dealing with so much data that nobody can, kind of track everything and keep everything top of mind. So I think we're going to get there. But I think it's going to be a number of years till we can get it into the right form factor, because obviously the Apple Vision Pro is not sleek and it's not, something you're going to wear for hours a day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know we're going to talk about it a little bit later on in the show, but these little AirPods, are already AI powered, really, aren't they? Right. Everything's, whether you're wearing glasses or they're in your ears, that it's connected to your smartphone, and now your smartphone's intelligent. It's got AI attached to it. So, as we say, it's already here, isn't it? It's not. So let's talk about ambient AI in the workplace environment. We picked up on a story. It was talking about healthcare, and there are surprisingly a number of vendors already in this space, including Microsoft. According to an article in Forbes, clinician burnout is at an all-time high, with admin tasks and documentation being a significant burden. So ambient AI technology promises to alleviate these stresses by automatically generating clinical notes during patient visits. So, Kevin, no one likes paperwork, right? But since the launch of AI meeting summaries, I'm never going back to typing notes up again. Is this acceptable in such kind of sensitive environments like healthcare?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, obviously, Microsoft bought Nuance, and now they have the DAX Copilot that is very targeted at, kind of this medical clinician setting. And they've compiled a lot of great statistics. One of the things that's happening, of course, is, especially in the US, is very litigious. So obviously documentation is paramount. They say the typical clinician deals with 25% more documentation over the last 10 years because they're obviously trying to cross the T's and dot the I's, just from a legal perspective. But that means then your clinician isn't paying attention to you. So in the surveys that Microsoft and others have done, the vast majority of patients prefer the interaction with their doctor when you have this, AI taking notes. And one of the other things that I found very interesting was, they cite that, patients, especially when you're nervous, you're worried about your health condition, you may forget between 40 and 60% of the instructions that your physician provides you at that visit. And one of the interesting things is, not only is they're taking notes for the clinician, but they're in some cases providing you with a summary of what those instructions are. So when you get home and you're like, oh man, I know I was supposed to do a few things, but I can't remember all of them. This really helps the patient, right? And, the truth is that a typical clinician sees around 20 patients a day. They deal with a patient caseload of approximately 2,500 patients. And so, ahead of a visit, having your doctor be able to get a quick summary of your, medical history and previous interactions, like effectively a summary of the meeting summaries, the visit summaries, that means that he or she can provide you with a lot better care. And then beyond that, the whole ambient AI, it's like the Apple Watch thing that can detect arrhythmias, or just different devices that allow, your vitals to be monitored, whether you're in the waiting room or when you go home. I mean, I think that this really ups the potentially the positive outcomes, and also just the ability to provide ongoing patient care. So this case, ambient AI, unlike the first example, this is all about positives as I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's just talk about this in the context of collaboration. And I picked this up, and I think you picked it up as well, from Cisco Webex recent event. They're getting into spatial computing as well. There's a concept known as distance zero, and Cisco's demonstrating some of these new capabilities with Apple Vision Pro, which kind of aims to create immersive virtual meetings, effectively eliminating the sense of distance, which I suppose that's what it's all about, that kind of presence thing.
Right.
So how might such technologies transform remote work and kind of global collaboration here, do you think, Kevin? What do you think the experience is going to be like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, Cisco for a while had and they still have the Cisco holographic display, which is a little bit different. Here, the spatial computing concept, I love the idea of distance zero because it really means, I like that from a marketing perspective. It really means like wherever we are, we feel like there's no distance between us. It's as if we're sitting across the table. This spatial computing piece gives like a 3D kind of rendering using multiple cameras and some of their video bars. I had the opportunity to try it out at WebEx One. I was a little underwhelmed only because it requires specific use cases. And I think that they, said for manufacturing and reviewing things, it helps, which I certainly can see. Like the true color aspect of it, I think is really important if you're, reviewing proofs or what have you. They like to do example of sneakers because previously they'd have to ship them kind of, across the world for people to review them. So I think it has some, use cases, but we're still kind of trying to figure this out. From my perspective, I thought it was fantastic that Cisco was able, just with a software upgrade, to enable this stereoscopic view. So it wasn't new hardware in your meeting room, but at the remote end, you had to wear, an Apple Vision Pro headset. It was, pretty cool doing a WebEx meeting inside of that. But once again, I think it will be for specialized use cases. But I think, with respect to sensors and these different devices, I think we're seeing some real creativity in terms of how to bring together all of these into more of, unified communication that's even unifying more pieces of the puzzle. And, I think it's exciting times to experiment with this.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. Well, I hope our audience are all warmed up with the concept of ambient AI. But next up, we're going to go over to Kevin for his a quick learning slot. The AI Minute. Kevin, what's today's word?
Well, today's word is bias. And here's what it is. It's really, the occurrence of skewed results due to either human factors that slant the original training data, the training data itself, or the AI, algorithm. And the reason this matters is if bias gets into your AI model, this can lead to distorted outputs and potentially harmful outcomes. So let's take a look at some real world examples of bias. We talked about healthcare. Truthfully, many AI healthcare models have underrepresented data from female patients. And so their ability to detect certain conditions, example around heart attacks and things like that, it does a much better job with the male-based data. So obviously this is of concern because you have, just bias in the training data. A second example is, people have run tests in image generation. It tends to create based on what was most prevalent in the training data, which means a lot of times if you say create a picture of a doctor, for instance, most typically, the image generation may choose to create a white male when, portraying specific professions. And obviously this is problematic. There's a great, I haven't done this before. There's a great book I want to recommend. I love the name of it, and it's a fantastic read, and it really delves into, some significant examples of bias and then what you can do if you're some of the people that are building these models. It's called The Weapons of Math Destruction. It was written by Kathy O'Neill in 2016. So it kind of predates, some of the giant chat GPT explosion. But, it's a fantastic book, and I definitely if you're interested in, bias and understanding where it may arise and how to combat it, absolutely recommend it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kevin. Another handy bit of knowledge to have as we continue to navigate the world of AI. But moving on, I'm pleased to introduce today's special guest. It's Adam Ball, co-founder and principal solutions architect at Cloud Revolution and the co-founder of Comms v Next, the Microsoft Teams and I suppose 365 community event. But I'm sure Adam can confirm more on that. But welcome, Adam. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good to see you. And let's start by having a little bit of an introduction. Give us a little bit of background on yourself,
Sure.
what you do at Cloud Revolution and what you do at Comms v Next.
Absolutely. So day to day, I'm out there helping customers. We are, for lack of a better term, a team systems integrator. So we help customers move towards Teams phone system. Very much, Kevin, I kind of had to chuckle at your slide there. So around bias. So I know that I have my own within that. So you can, it's not just within the AI world that we have that. But yeah, so that's what we do on a day-to-day basis is we're helping customers solve their communications problems around phone systems. On a Comms v Next standpoint, what we're doing is we're trying to build a community. We've done a great job so far. We had over 300 people to Denver last year. We're aiming for over 400 this year I guess in 2025, 400 plus people to come and talk about communications and AI and everything in there from that standpoint.
Fantastic. Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, that's great. So you recently posted a LinkedIn poll about people that wear AirPods all the time, even in social settings. So two initial questions. So what motivated you to create this poll? And can you summarize the results out of that poll?
Yeah. So the initial thing, and we've all been there, especially some of us who may have kids who are of a certain age, and so where they walk around with their earbuds in and everything like that, and when you're trying to talk to them, you get the what, huh, etc. And so we're frustrated already on that. But I was listening to a podcast about technology and business and everything, and they brought this concept up of ambient AI, and it was really in general, and that's what got me thinking about it. And Rob, you talk about your Meta glasses and some of the issues that come up with that, or just the folks that use the AirPods. And it's super interesting. And I'll say this. It actually, what triggers in my head with the AirPods, Kevin, is actually from Ender's Game. So if you go into the following books, he talks about the bug in his ear kind of thing, and that's what it makes me think of, honestly. And there's a lot of benefit of being able to walk around and can take that data in, but at the same point in time, there's also this societal aspect is what kind of triggered in my head of, if you and I are sitting there having a conversation and you have them in, as the person on the other side of that conversation, do I feel like I'm being listened to? Do I feel like are you distracted? And so, if you're wearing sunglasses that are flashing things up in front of you, are you watching the news, paying attention to something else? And we become more and more distracted. And we already struggle with that, even sitting at your PC with all the little things that pop up at you. So this is kind of what drove me. What was interesting was, by and large, most people agreed with, take the AirPods out while you're talking to me. And so that was the overwhelming, I think it was like 80% of the respondents came back with that answer. And it makes sense from that perspective. But to me, it's all about what's that line in the sand of when we're having a conversation, what does that look like from there? And I will say the last thing I'll comment on this is I'm so glad I did not grow up in an era where somebody could be walking around with glasses on and recording everything that's happening. So from that standpoint, I think the next generation is now under more surveillance than ever before, good or bad. So
it does make you think, though, doesn't it? Because surely replay is going to be the next big thing, right?
Yeah.
Once we've got a wearable on and it's on all the time, it's not in your pocket. It's on your wearable, on maybe as a set of Meta Ray Bans or whatever.
Yep.
And it's on all the time. You're going to be able to recall any part of what happened potentially. I think that's scary and amazing in some ways. But
that was a Black Mirror episode, right? And then it becomes searchable. And then anything do, like the police go and they look at what the heck. It's like wearing a body cam or whatever all the time.
Body cam,
yeah. Or people, but look at the car cameras, and
dash cams. Yep,
dash cams.
It's the same thing. Yeah,
couldn't remember what it was called. So,
yeah.
But I think we're far down that path, so I just expect it to increase.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the interesting part is we, as a society, we've just become okay with being recorded 24/7, and there's a lot of me that says, is that even okay, or should that be okay? But at the same point, we're teaching our kids that too, by the fact that how many houses have cameras sitting outside, so they see when they come and when they go. There's no sneaking in and out of houses anymore like we did when we were kids. I mean, it's just not possible for the most part. So
yeah, it's interesting. But in your LinkedIn post, you wrote, "I don't really have the answer, but given what I've seen from the world around me and my own kids, I really think that we need to be able to draw a line and encourage some sort of societal rules around this." Now, I know you say you don't have all the answers, but what are your current thoughts on this? Where might we actually draw that line, do you think?
I think this is a hard part because there's this push for tech, and I'm being in the industry and where I've grown up and everything through it. I love to see where the advances in technology come from. Kevin, that whole concept of where can it apply, whether it's in a medical fashion or wherever you're at, really does have a lot of benefit to us as a society and everything. But I think there's also these unwritten rules of society that we've gotten away from within interactions in polite society. And I know that sounds really Victorian potentially in some of these aspects, but I think that's where I come back to of what is like, okay, if we're sitting down over coffee, I'm going to put my phone face down. I'm going to take the glasses off. Obviously, if they're actual eyeglasses, you have to keep them on just for that, but I'll turn them off, or I'll take the earbuds out, whatever that may be, so that you're not distracted and we can have those conversations. I think that's really the important piece for me to do, because from my perspective, there's a difference between AI or technology aiding us in our day-to-day, like, whether it's maps or whatever it is in the car, that's super helpful, right, to cut down on distracted driving. But then there's person-to-person relationships, and the longer I'm in business and the longer I've been doing this, it's less and less about the technology and more about the relationships and the personal connections that you make. And I think there's a spot where ambient AI becomes a blocker for that, just because it becomes a distraction.
Yeah, so having just gone through the kind of the U.S. election cycle, anything that you can do to make society more polite, I will get behind.
Totally. You and me both.
Well, there's potentially a big issue there, isn't there, around misinformation? And if that's in your ear, that's potentially a big issue, is it? All that information going in unchecked.
Right.
Well, that's that whole bias thing. Like, you're being fed information 24/7, and let's say it's not the right information, and you're making decisions as you navigate the world, whether that's in society or the business world. But let's pivot a bit, Adam, and to Microsoft Teams, an area where you have deep expertise. You say that's really where you focus your day on. Yeah. So when we think of ambient intelligence, the sensors, like, what sensors do you think you could bring into unified communications that would have some positive business value? So, for instance, Microsoft Places is coming out. With knowing where all your team members are by tracking their phone, is that good or bad? Knowing meeting room occupancy, do you see this as providing positive, measurable business benefit, or is it just, techno geeking, let's connect these in? How does this impact teams as we move forward?
Can I just answer yes to all of that? And I say that because I think there's a couple of things in there, Kevin, that I want to highlight on it because I think it's super fascinating. One, Teams is already bringing and Microsoft's already bringing that capability to say where you're working and for you to identify that.
Right.
So to be able to see in real time, like where your coworkers are so that you can kind of, where your cohort is. So it's like, oh, well, they're already in the, here, I can get over there and there's a benefit there.
Right.
The other part that I see on that is I'm also wondering, and this kind of ties back to the last question a little bit, is what's the mental stress that we put on ourselves with it? And I start to think about that because we are more, and I see this in my own business of we're more and more trying to be an always on, but also trying to provide this like barrier of I'm able to turn off at what time kind of mindset. And so what is that? What do those sensors drive? Like, what are we trying to drive with it? And so really, Kevin, the answer to your question is what are the real business requirements? What are we, as a business, what are those, what's the benefit to us? Is it because we have a very dispersed remote workforce and we're trying to get them to understand where each other are at? So, if Rob and I are colleagues and we're in the same area, we can see that. And it's like, oh, we're going to use that as a driver for an impromptu meetup,
Right.
so that we can have a good discussion. That's a great thing. But if it's really just because it's data for data's sake, I don't necessarily know that drives any benefit. So it's really understanding that. Understanding this has been a fascinating one ever since for the last few years is that whole, you talk about the meeting room space, like, well, how many people are in the meeting room?
Yeah.
Obviously there was a point in time recently where we had to count people because we had to understand like that room allows for 10 people, but we only are going to allow 5 into it for right now type thing due to the pandemic that we came out of. But going forward, it's more around, well, how many rooms are being used? We have a 14-person room. Is it consistently being used by 3 people? Or is it consistently being used by 14? Those things do matter to facilities folks. Like they care about that because they might make business decisions around those rooms of, do we need to split that room into 2? Do we need to change
Right.
that room up, etc. Maybe it's a super heavily used room. There's a lot of those things that happen. So I think there's good and bad within that from that standpoint. But I think the part where I get back to, Kevin, is what are we trying to drive forward
Yeah.
with that specifically?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, obviously technology is all exciting, but the most exciting, at least to me, is properly applying it to business requirements. So your
Yeah, for
answer that
sure.
it
Yeah.
depends, that's a valid answer, right? So,
Sorry, I'm a
and I
consultant
expect,
at heart.
there you go. Well, and I expect that Microsoft Ignite, which is coming up, there's going to be a lot more information about Microsoft places as well. So
Yeah, it's a super interesting technology for sure. I'm curious to see organizations when they where they deploy it, how it actually gets utilized, and does the real benefit that Microsoft thinks is there come to fruition?
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of cognitive fatigue, Microsoft Ignite will probably give us all some element of sensory overload, much like what we're talking about now. But it's a really interesting topic, this. Even with, Microsoft Copilot will be talked about, in every
Nonstop.
conversation at Microsoft Ignite nonstop. The kind of acceptance of this AI Copilot in our daily lives is something that we're going to have to get used to, isn't it? And I suppose ambient AI is just another level of that conversation and that kind of future of work
Yeah,
potentially. So it's very
yeah.
interesting.
It's just how ultimately it just comes back to how much of a distractor is it versus how much of an aid is it. So like
Yeah.
I, and I think about it differently from like being in the business world, Rob, of sitting here at my machine, I'm focused and I'm having it pop up things that are really pertinent to me, like, hey, your next meeting's coming up in 5 minutes or whatever it may be. Like, here's the notes that you need. And, Kevin, we talk about this where it's like, here are some of the notes that you need to know just before so you can have a
Right.
little bit of just in time or whatever. Take that and put that out of the business world, put that as my teenage son driving and having that happen, and now all of a sudden you have more and more distracted driving. And so that's where I get to in this
Mm.
of that societal aspect of where do we need to turn off so that we're not distracted versus where can we leverage it for benefit for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a cultural kind of etiquette thing happening here, or should happen at some point, like a virtual kind of do not disturb sign that just signals when everyone's had enough or doesn't want that AI input. But we'll see. We'll see. We might end up with little lights on, like something out of the movies. But
Totally.
so, folks, social connection or disconnection, ambient AI as a helper, or is it an intruder? I suppose privacy versus convenience, impact on mental health and well-being is, do we need to accept that we're going to have AI co-pilots in our daily lives? Well, there's lots to ponder, but this has been a fantastic conversation. Really, really interesting. So, Kevin, Adam, it's been great talking today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And thanks to everyone for watching our AI show. If you've got some good takeaways from today's session, do give us a quick mention on social, and you can connect with Kevin and myself on LinkedIn, and they're going to be down below in the description. So I'm Rob Scott from UC Today. Thanks for watching.